All right. Thank you, Q. Appreciate it. Hey, Fred, how you doing, buddy?
Fantastic.
I'm glad to hear it. You just witnessed yesterday the Cleveland Browns going to 3-13, 20-3 to the Miami Dolphins. I'm sure you're riding high after that. You didn't get a chance to talk to Kevin Stefanski today. That's probably bringing you back down. You get to talk to him tomorrow and all that. But I got to ask you, what was the mood like in the locker room and all that after the Cleveland Browns faced the Miami Dolphins yesterday?
Pretty solemn. I mean, not much really going on there, as you could expect. I mean, I didn't really see moping around or anything, but
Yeah,
Miles Garrett was playing his music. He plays old time, music. He does it right up until he starts talking.
right.
I don't know what kind of mechanism he has, but yeah, I did see history. I mean, to see him get 2 sacks and get 14, at home was probably the highlight of the game.
Yep.
First time somebody ever did that in 4 straight years. So, I mean, you got greatness in front of you. Um, you just want to see a little bit more from the rest, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But
Yeah, you certainly do. Defense is still playing tough. Offense, not so much, as evidenced by the 3 points yesterday. Hey, before we go on, as always, the usual disclaimer: this show is powered by your comments and questions. We got a couple, including a superstar chat saved up from Quincy's show. We're going to attack those here real soon, but please hit us up with your comments and questions in the YouTube and Twitch chat rooms. Give us something to talk about here. I brought some questions with me, but really, we want to talk about what you guys want to talk about, which is probably not going to be the Dolphins game. It's probably going to be more about this offseason. So please hit us up with your comments and questions, and we will dive into those throughout the course of the show. So let's get straight into it, Fred. We've already got a couple of questions from the chat room. First one here from Fumble13, asking you, do you feel that the team has quote unquote checked out?
I don't know what checking out means. And, I know what you're getting at. But I thought they played hard. I mean, it's one of those situations where you're sitting there yesterday. I mean, I generally am objective in watching,
Mm-hmm.
but generally you hope the outcome is a win because players in a better mood, everybody's spirits are up, and generally the fans that are reading our information are more interested in tuning into it as opposed to I'm quit following you, I'm done with you because I don't want to be reminded about the Browns. So, but you almost, as you were seeing, feeling like they didn't want, you just felt like you didn't really want them to win because you're like, what is the purpose of a win here? It's kind of, there's not, this isn't like it's going to turn the franchise around going into
Right.
next year. Um, and, I'll just say, when you say checking out, sometimes I feel like, and it's just my opinion, that maybe Kevin Stefanski's checked out or the front up because you cannot tell me that your best chance to win yesterday was playing DTR. I mean, I don't know what the fans think, but I've seen enough in 2 years. I could have told you what he is. He's a gadget type guy. He might be able
Mm-hmm.
to, be a slash wide receiver, quarterback, run, the wildcat, that type of thing. But he's not a drop back NFL passer. And I don't think he's durable enough. And it's almost like they told him don't run so much because he slid once yesterday and the fans were booing. Like, that's
Right.
what you do. Why are you sliding?
Right.
But you could almost see the coaching saying, get down, you're going to get knocked out if you don't slide. So even if Jameis Winston's throwing interceptions, they're throwing 300 yards, and and it's not like DTR's taking care of the ball. The Browns had 2 turnovers. Who
Right.
committed them both? DTR,
Exactly. Yeah.
So you can't tell me, and that's the most frustrating thing. It's just like with Deshaun Watson, he's saying he's the best chance to win. And after the game, he was asked about next week, and he said, well, we're not going to go there yet. But he was asked, did you think about going to Zappy? No. And he said, why not? And he said, because I felt that this was the best chance for us to win. Well, that tells you then that you don't think much of Bailey Zappi, and you put Winston at third so he couldn't play. So I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm kind of defaulting back into OBR off-season mode where it's all draft 24/7.
Right.
That's what I think 23 of the 26 years have been, is the whole off-season is hoping to get that one guy, that LeBron James or the Michael Jordan or the whatever the name is, that's going to be the turnaround guy to the franchise. It's not realistic, but that's the hope springs eternal going in the offseason, that they'd be able to find that franchise quarterback through the draft or through some other means.
Yeah, well, I hope this hope springs eternal, because, I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are just selling doom 24/7, that there's no hope, that there's the salary cap's too restrictive because of Watson. Andrew Berry doesn't know what he's doing. You have to burn it down to the studs. I don't believe that. I know a lot of people on our staff don't believe that. But there are people out there who just think that, all hope is lost. I think that this team can bounce back in 2025. I think that they have a lot of work to do. I think that they have to get a little bit lucky, but I do think that this team has the opportunity to bounce back, assuming that they don't go and trade Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward and, rip everything down to the studs. We've already got a bunch of really good questions, and I want to thank guys for lining up with them. And we will get to as many as we possibly can. And please feel free to keep adding to the queue. Really appreciate the questions that are already coming in. I want to get to one that came in during Quincy's show, a super chat that came in, and hopefully Rex is still around to hear our answer. He was asking Q, you've mentioned getting a wide receiver vet during the offseason. What do you think about Tyler Lockett since Jackson Smith and Jigba has emerged in Seattle? I'm not going to go into Tyler Lockett in detail here. I just want to ask you, Fred, taking a look at the wide receiver core, is that an area where you would be investing, draft assets or trade assets this offseason, or would you be focused elsewhere? Are you happy with the wide receiver core, or would you be looking for an additional veteran there?
Well, I see enough of Jerry Jeudy to feel like he's entrenched as one of the top 2. I'm not still convinced he's a number 1. I think he would look a lot better if you had, Amari Cooper in his prime, and he was, the pair with him. I mean, I like T. Higgins. I mean, you might as well go for broke, and just spend money. They seem to know how to do that. If you could convince, the problem is it all goes back to quarterback. You got to get a capable quarterback. Who would want to come here and play with DTR or Deshaun Watson in what we've seen? I mean, they threw the ball 18 times to Jeudy yesterday. It was obvious he was the only one they were even confident could make a play. I mean, Elijah Moore, who's your number 2, I think he had 5 targets and he had 1 catch for 1 yard. I mean, there's been times Moore has looked competent, but he doesn't. I don't know if he's anything more than a 3rd receiver or a 4th receiver. And I don't know what he wants as a free agent. You could bring him back, but I think I'm intrigued with Cedric Tillman. But what I'm worried about him is now it's back-to-back years. He's basically ended the season on injuries or not injury reserve, but with a concussion. I mean, last year he had a concussion and it was late, but he didn't play in the games that would have given him reps in the playoff game. And now he's missed 5 games with that concussion. I still don't understand it. I see him practicing every day now for 3 or 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they have to, pass some test. But what in the world's going on with him? So why in the world would you even play him this week? Even if it's that much concern. So I don't know if he's seen enough to count on him, and with that 2-for-2 history with concussion. So yeah, I mean Lockett is somebody that has been productive. I just got to see what your options are. I don't know if you can just. I don't think you necessarily want to take a wide receiver with the 3rd pick in the draft if that's where you pick. I know you took Braylon Edwards 3rd overall. I mean, so you got that going for you. But, I could see in a scenario, I don't know if Hunter is the best wide receiver in the draft, but if you decide there's not a quarterback that you want, and you trade down a couple spots and you can get 2 guys like the top wide receiver in the draft and a starting defensive lineman, that would be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, as far as free agents, it's going to be you're going to have to sell a free agent that there's somebody that can get them the ball,
Exactly.
And
that's a hard sell after watching DTR.
Yeah, I mean,
on Sunday,
he's got Joe Burrow throwing the ball, and the attention's all going to Jamar Chase. He's got a great situation, so it would seem that he's totally going to be driven by the money if he does not go back there, which doesn't seem like would happen. So, we talk about this every year in free agency. By the time it gets to free agency, the guys that are available are never available because if they're really good, somehow the team figures out how to keep them, whether they franchise them or whatever they do, or they re-sign with that team. They use leverage with other ones. But yeah, I think there's a lot, almost every area on offense needs to be addressed. They need to get, even if it's pre-2024 offense. I mean, the offense from a year ago looks better than this thing. They were averaging at least in the 20s last year. You would have won a few more games if you'd have just scored 20 points. I mean, scoring 3 points and 6. The last 3 games, 7, 6, and 3. I mean, that's 16 points in 3 games.
Yeah, it's a complete disaster.
Explosion before that, 14. They did have the 32-point game, but they've been point challenged all year, and I'd certainly like them to put the attention to get the offense. But it starts with the quarterback. Who's throwing the ball? Who's getting the ball out, distributing to the receivers?
Well, let's zero in on the quarterback questions. We've got a number of them here stacked up. Jeffrey Champion asked, would you give up a few picks for Trevor Lawrence at this stage in his career? Of course, it depends on what those picks are, but let's just postulate mid-round picks. Would you give up a few mid-round picks for Trevor Lawrence at this stage? Take a chance on him.
You talk about the Watson salary. I think you'd be paying him $55 million. That's like Watson's like a bargain financially. I mean, $9 million more a year. I was never, maybe it's because he played at Clemson against the Buckeyes, and I just didn't like seeing him play the way. But I never really was convinced he was a number 1 pick. If you remember when he came out, he was like a no-brainer. That's why Urban Meyer went there to Jacksonville. Right. I just haven't seen it. Maybe he's like a lot of these guys. Baker Mayfield took him a little while to bloom. Sam Darnold. Maybe his year's best is in front of him, but I don't think he's the guy that I would go for. I mean, I think he'd be better than what they have, but I don't think that that's the type of guy that I would go all in to get.
Yeah. Manimal wants to know if there's a QB in the mid rounds this year that you feel would be good enough to take a chance on. Let's talk, third, fourth, fifth round, a Dylan Gabriel type. We've talked about him in the past. Will Howard, guys along this line, those lines who might be good enough to distribute the ball. Probably not a franchise QB, but someone you might want to take a chance on to see if they could develop.
You come to mind your Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy, guys like that. I mean, I feel like, it's a crapshoot. They got to be in the right system. I think the thing worked with San Francisco because they had an offense where you just kind of put a guy in the cockpit and they had playmakers with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Ayuk, McCaffrey. Just don't screw things up. Just get the ball out to those guys, make a play,
Right.
don't turn it over. I don't know. I haven't looked very deep into the draft at all. I watched the Cam Ward game the other day. I thought he looked pretty good to me. The only guy I've seen highlight of that I think might be a quarterback that you could go in to get. That's the only one that's interested me so far. I've just been for 30 years. I've seen the second round guys, the third round guys, the fifth round guys, the undrafted. You got to hire. It's so much of a crapshoot. The higher their skill set is, I think gives you the best chance. I mean, even when they had the pick and they picked Baker Mayfield, there was no certainties who was going to be great in that. I mean, look at Josh Rosen. He didn't even get out of there, and he was, at a time, a lot of people thought he was the best one in that group. And Sam Darnold, you thought, oh, he didn't work out. Now he's blooming, and we all know what Baker's doing now in his 7th year. But Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson were kind of the surefire, players, MVP candidates, and there was no consensus. In fact, when Jackson gets picked, 32nd overall, I mean, makes everybody look stupid. So I'm just saying those guys were all considered first round talent. I don't know how many non-first round guys are. You got to get lucky. Joe Montana in the 3rd round. You can say they got lucky. Tom Brady in the 6th round, they got lucky. You got to, because if they thought they were Hall of Fame guys, they would have taken them with the first pick overall in the draft, whoever was drafting, So I don't know. There's probably names and the draft people would say, but I'm just not interested. I would rather, if you can't get like a Cam Ward guy, I would rather get a veteran, retread. I mean, if you'd asked me last offseason about Sam Darnold coming in instead of Jameis Winston, I would have said, no thanks.
Yeah, same here.
Now it's like, oh, Sam Darnold, and it's just getting in the right place. I think if you're going to stay with Stefanski, which I think they are, get somebody that he can work with that can make the Case Keenum into a great player for a year type of guy, like even Jacoby Brissett, I thought looked really good that year. He was filling the shoes for, Watson. I mean, they were averaging 24 points a game, if I remember, when he was the quarterback. And everybody says, why don't you just leave it alone? But obviously the anticipation to get Deshaun Watson, we all know how that turned out. So I don't know. I mean, if you can get somebody like a Flacco or a Winston or somebody that can play that style, but not throw the ball to the other team, that would go a long way for this team. I think if you would have just had a quarterback didn't turn the ball over, to the degree those guys did, you'd be singing a different tune right now. In fact, when I look at this takeaway giveaway minus 20, you've turned the ball over 32 times, with one game to go, and you're minus 20. It's a wonder they won 3 games. It's abysmal, and it starts with taking care of the ball, with the quarterback. I mean, 21 interceptions.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
that's
with
alone is 9 turnovers more than the defense has gotten this entire year. So, combination of no takeaways and a ton of giveaways.
yeah, it puts us exactly in the position we are today. With picking a quarterback being such an inexact science, right? I mean, if there was anyone who could actually do it on a regular basis, they would be making hundreds of millions of dollars right now, and their names would be known to everyone. They would be high in demand, but obviously no one can do it, regularly. So why don't you put it in the hands of the person on in the organization who best knows the offense, and that would be Kevin Stefanski. I've been an advocate of basically going to Kevin Stefanski and saying of the available free agents or trade targets or draft eligible players, which ones best fit your offense, rather than here, have a Deshaun Watson, change your offense to fit around him. Just ask Stefanski who best fits your offense. And DTR, for example, was not the type of player I ever imagined being part and parcel of a Kevin Stefanski offense. Fumble 13 asks, now that DTR has proven to be ineffective, would you keep him next year even as a backup? I know what my answer would be. What's your answer, Fred?
Well, the only way is if you didn't feel like you could improve the number 3 spot. I mean, the idea was you were thinking Deshaun Watson had a skill set of being mobile on the run, and this would be kind of like a Deshaun Watson light and balance out the contract with a 5th-round pick, on about $1 million a year deal. But I just don't think he's the answer long term. I would try to improve it. But look at, as long as Andrew Berry's making the picks and making the roster, he cut Tyler Huntley, and we saw what he did yesterday. He looked night and day better than DTR. And unless even if you have somebody that plays better, which I thought Huntley did in training camp, but they stayed with him. Now that he's playing, I don't know why else you're playing him. I think everybody knows what you have, unless you're just trying to make sure you lose the game, because, I don't think anybody thinks going into Baltimore he's going to be able to, pull off the miracle of miracles against a team who's not resting their players and very motivated to win so they can win the division, especially since they're playing before the Steelers. So it's not like they can see the Steelers, lost, they can now rest. They have to really go out and win. So I would say right now it's 50-50 whether he's back. But right now, if you don't have a quarterback and you're looking at getting 3 of them, I don't know. I think you'd be fortunate to find 2. So I think he could be the 3rd quarterback, but I don't think he's your number 2.
Right. Well, he is on a cheap rookie deal, but I'm hoping they reboot that entire room. I mean, they're stuck with Watson, obviously, but other than that, I hope they reboot the entire room. I don't want to see any of those guys back. That's just me. Let's talk a little bit more quarterback. MC Lawrence at the start of the show said, "Hey, Fred and Barry, Browns just need to draft well and develop their guys like Steelers and Ravens do. That would be nice." AB tried to take a shortcut with Watson. Thinking about that, Fred, don't you think that the Browns at that point in time really got after Watson because they thought that they weren't going to have a high round draft pick to pick a franchise quarterback? They thought that their team was going to be successful year after year and that they would not be positioned like they're going to be positioned now to take a franchise quarterback at the top of the draft, and therefore they had to go out and make a deal like this?
Absolutely. I mean, they had a good team. They just felt like Baker Mayfield wasn't going to take them to the next step. We saw it, and I'm honest, I felt that way too. I felt he was a good starting quarterback in the NFL, average, maybe at times above average, but he wasn't he wasn't that guy that led you on that game-winning drive. I mean, we saw it in the Packers game that on Christmas Day. We saw it so many times. And then I think he lit everything on fire himself. I won't even go into all that. But when he refused to play the last week and he said he was having surgery, that was all his own decision. He just announced it in the press conference, and that didn't go well. They never said anything, but I think they pretty much said, we're moving on from him when he threw Stefanski under the bus in that press conference and said they could call better plays and, all the stuff that happened then. And then I still think he'd probably still been the quarterback if he would have just kept his mouth shut. But when word leaked out about the Watson, he went out and wrote a letter that, thank you, Browns fans, but I've asked for a trade, and all that. So he's grown up, and unfortunately for the Browns, he's playing his best, somewhere else. So with that being said, yeah, they made that trade knowing they were burning the bridge with Mayfield as soon as the word got out. They felt if you got, and just from the outside at the time, not having studied, I think most Browns fans, if you take away all that off the field stuff, just as a player, man, I thought he was like one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, he threw for 4,800 yards the last time he played in 2020. 3-time Pro Bowler. And I understand why they did it, because they're like, if we can get him, we have the quarterback set for 10 years.
Right.
And we're going to be in the playoffs, so we're drafting 20s, late 20s, and you're not going to get a quarterback there. You don't need one, and just maintain. Well, we see that colossal mistake has not only torpedoed, the last couple years, but it could very well torpedo the next several years. I don't think they were, I think they felt like we're not worried about the money. I think the money came out of desperation. I don't know exactly, but you have to know, we all know when the word came out that Watson had eliminated the Browns, there's only 3 teams left in the competition. And then it came back. I was surprised as anybody when it came up that the trade had been made. I'm sure, however it was, Andrew Berry's talking to him and saying, what would it take to reconsider? What amount of money? Name whatever figure. And they named that figure, and they went to Haslam and said, we can do it. We got 10 minutes to make this decision or whatever. It wasn't like I said, well, let's think about this and we'll get back to you. It was like, because they were out of the running. So I'm sure, that's how it came about, something like that. So when it's all said and done, you're in this position. I don't think they're worried, as Jack Duffins pointed out, that they can move around this. But you got to still find somebody. The fact that we're talking about this over and over and over, long before Deshaun Watson joined the Browns, that's all we talked about. Every offseason, every year, this is the guy. I mean, we went to the combine and we the number Brady Quinn thought maybe he was there. Johnny Manziel. I mean, Brandon Whedon. How many guys you take with the 22nd pick? But you just gotta. I just think your odds are better from what I've seen. He might not be, but this Cam Ward to me looks like that he's the closest thing to being a quarterback that could step in. If you can't get him, if it all turns out that everybody, if the Browns are third, that's probably too low. The number 1 team, even if they don't need a quarterback, will probably trade it to a team that needs it. And if the Browns want him and they're at 3, move up to 1 and make sure you get him or something. But I don't know. I just think the most practical would probably, even if you could get him, I wouldn't be opposed to getting, a veteran quarterback that can win next year, that could step in. I'm not opposed to having a young guy sit a bit.
I agree with you completely.
Would a Kirk Cousins want to come here knowing the Browns might do to him? Like, he could sign that big deal, and then they drafted Michael Penix, like 7th or 8th overall. I don't know if he has much leverage, but that's an issue there because
Yep.
free agency's before the draft.
Yeah, Cousins has leverage. He can assert his no trade clause and force himself to free agency, thereby creating a situation where he can pick his team. So he does have some leverage. Mike Rodriguez wants to know if Haslam can hire a voodoo doctor from New Orleans to do a cleanse, maybe sort our way through this quarterback nightmare. I don't know. I'm willing to try anything, and Jimmy's got the money. Maybe he can do a cleanse on politicians in downtown Cleveland and get them out of his way to build this dome. That's getting more and more complicated by the minute.
You could
But
get Serrano from Major League. I think he was connected.
there you go. Get Joe Boo some of his rum and rock and roll it. But if you really want to cleanse, what I suggest is that you try out some Core Home Fitness. We've introduced you to our friends at Core Home Fitness over the course of this year. They are the ones with the best adjustable dumbbells on the planet, as we've been telling you. But New York Times, Men's Health, Consumers Reports, they've all told you. I don't know how many more times we can tell you before you believe that these guys make the best barbells on the planet. They can help you crush your goals in 2025 as we turn the clock or flip the calendar tomorrow. And you can crush your goals. They've got everything going for them. They've got a US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. They know what they're doing. So please check out corehomefitness.com. Check out the videos that they've got on the site. Check out the app that they've got on the site. And they have stepped up to sponsor the OBR, and they absolutely rock. They also sponsor the Newswire and the Daily Bloviation, keeping me busy and off the streets, and they deserve credit for that. So thank you, Core Home Fitness, for your support, and I hope everyone listening checks them out at corehomefitness.com. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about the quarterback, and then we will change the subject. I think we've got some more quarterback questions. Clay F wants to know if DTR can be a receiver because he played it in high school. We know he can be a high school receiver, right, Fred? But they've never tried him at receiver on the Browns.
Yeah, he was the wide receiver ahead of Cedric Tillman at Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. And the quarterback was Tate Martell, who played at Ohio State. And when Martell went to Ohio State, they converted DTR to quarterback for his last year. He had been the wide receiver, and that opened up the starting role for Cedric Tillman. He was actually behind DTR. Now, yeah, it's intriguing. He's very athletic. I still think he's a little slight. I mean, they list him at 6'2", but he just doesn't seem that big. They got him like 6'2", 200, but maybe we've seen that's been a natural route. It's not been in vogue recently, but Steelers had a guy like that. That was kind of a quarterback / wide receiver, and there's been a lot of them over the years. Randall L. and different ones.
Antoine Randall L.
I don't know. It's a possibility. He's a good kid. I like him. I just don't know if he's a quarterback. I don't know at this point, what he could do as a receiver. They may keep him on the team as an athlete, just with potential.
Chat username wants to know if we see Cousins or similar as QB1, Winston as QB2, and Watson as QB3 for 2025. Is that a triumvirate that you would get behind, Fred?
I don't see it because if Watson was their guy for next year, he'd be playing now. Why wouldn't you keep going with him and hope he could work his way out of it or coach him out of, because he was throwing 300 yards. It was just the interceptions that killed him. And I have to think they've moved on in their mind, because why else would you? I mean, you're telling him that unless you've said in private, we just want to see what he can do. Or they're saying, we don't want you to, we want to keep it at a down note. So, everybody's not coming after you. I don't think that's going to happen. I think
Yeah.
he's more not as welcome around the league. So, yeah. I mean, if you get Cousins, I think it's more likely to have a, veteran backup. Your typical NFL backup. I felt like Winston, if he wasn't a starter, he was one of the top free agent backups. In fact, if not the top. I had forgot about him till they signed him, and because I at the time thought you should bring back Joe Flacco, but I felt like Winston could do everything Flacco could do. I mean, we've seen
Right.
Flacco; he's thrown interceptions, he's lost the magic, with the Colts, but he had a great run. So I don't see that. Watson definitely. I don't know how you can work out unless he just says, I want out of here. And I still don't know if a player wants out. I just still don't think you can get around all the salary cap stuff, the dead cap.
Right. Right. Okay, we've got a variety of questions here. We're going to try to hit them in the last 20 minutes here, as many of them as we can. Serge MDC wants to know, did Vrabel earn his consulting fee? I don't know what his consulting fee was. It was
Well,
probably
I
pretty
was on a
admirable.
radio show and somebody said, that there's a comment saying, if they only won 3 games, what did he contribute? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how much say he had. I mean, he was outside looking in. He's given his input, but he didn't really. You can't set the tone. My biggest thing with Vrabel, as far as if they were going to make a coaching change, to me, it seemed like he would make sense because I think he would be kind of the antithesis of Stefanski. I might be wrong because I've never been around him as a head coach. But as soft as it seems Kevin is, I think Vrabel would be the opposite, hard
Mm,
and tough and, high expectations, get in the player's face when they false start or do whatever, as opposed to, oh, well, we're going to do better next time, and the things we hear from the coach, nobody really getting benched or sat down or anything
right.
significant. More of a toughness, if you want tough, accountable, seems to be more the epitome of that. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what, as far as the offensive line coach, he's always been good at that. And he just stepped in, and I'd see him out there, but I'd see him, alongside with Dickerson. I don't think necessarily that he took over. I think that was a throwaway comment by one of the national people that just kind of made it sound like Vrabel's running the show. And he went out of his way when we interviewed him, and he didn't really want to be interviewed, but
Mm-hmm.
he got the blessing from Stefanski and Barry and everything. And he really was gracious and didn't say anything out of turn. Like, I'm just here. This is great to be back home and all that. He didn't say anything out of line or he was going to step on anybody's toes or get in the way. And frankly, he might have told the Hasms if they even asked that I don't want that Kevin brought me in and then you hire me and fire him, type of a thing. I don't know.
Right.
But um, he's just, he brought a lot of energy. He was racing Jameis Winston every day between drills and they were running and he run from drill to drill. He showed more hustle than a lot of the players. He just seemed like a lead by example guy, like,
Yeah.
let's run through the wall type. I think he has a better record, better resume than Stefanski does. And I was just saying, if you're going to make a change, there's a guy right there.
Right. Definitely
We
a
got it.
high energy guy. Supposedly front runner for the Las Vegas job. They really like him there. getting a sniff from New Orleans, supposedly. But I really didn't like that comment in that story, calling him effectively the offensive line coach. I'm not sure where they got that, but the way people will read that is like, well, what's Andy Dickerson doing then? Right? Mm-hmm. It's really an attack on Andy Dickerson. I don't think it was intended that way, but that's the way it'll be read in Cleveland. And sometimes I don't think people know the damage that they do with these offhand remarks that are in these columns. And I've not read any other thing anywhere or heard anything anywhere from anyone saying Andy Dickerson's not doing his job, right? Which is what you would infer from that article. So I didn't like it at all. But that's just my opinion. Let's see here from Dean Bowditch. Do you think Haslam will shock the world and fire Barry and Stefanski? And what are your thoughts on Carson Beck out of Georgia? Well, let's take the first half of that one first, Fred. Do you think that there is a scenario where Haslam sort of goes back on his word and cleans house?
Well, it's interesting because I'm working on a story, about this situation. What do you do to run sometime this week? And I was doing a little research. You remember Albert Breer? It got a little play. He's Sports Illustrated Monday morning quarterback. He wrote back in November around Thanksgiving that the plan is to keep Stefanski and Barry together as a duo. And he had to get that from the owner or somebody close to the owner. And he said, barring a cataclysmic or a catastrophe in the final 6 games. Well, so far they've lost 5. They're 0-5 since then, and probably will lose this week. That would be 0-6. I don't know how you can get any more cataclysmic than that. But even with that said, I don't really think they would make a change. I can't explain. I don't know how you can finish 0-6 and be 3-14 and still sell that to bring it back the way the turnover is in the NFL when teams are like that. I know you like them together. I know you like, but how in the world do you sell that this is going to be any better? So that's the conundrum I see, is that we talked about the pre-snap penalties. We talked about all these mistakes. They're all the coach's fault, is who else gets blamed for that? The players are doing it, but you're negative 20 in turnovers, 32 turnovers. It's like, I don't know who else you blame. And then if you say, well, you don't have good enough players, well, who drafted them? Who put the roster together? So it's, I think that the idea will be, we believe in this. This is like Quincy was saying, the solidarity, stand together, stand the course, a blip in the screen. We got a plan to turn things around. I think Myles Garrett saying what he did holds him a little more to the fire. And I don't know what their plan would be. I don't know what they tell him. I wish they would. I know they won't, but I wish they would say a little more to the public other than we got to do better. And yeah, that's disappointing. Okay, we'll go with that, because it is frustrating, and you can probably hear my voice in the media. We don't need to know all the information how the sausage is made, but we get no information on what is going on other than trust us, we know what we're doing. And I just don't know if you can really look in the 5 years other than saying 2 playoffs, 2 coach of the years. I thought it was interesting. I'll bring this up while I'm on this. The last time we talked to Andrew Berry was November 6th at the bye. And somebody said, do you think you and Kevin are going to be able to see this through? And he went on quite a bit on all the accolades Stefanski, and it was obvious he had researched to how many two-time coach of the years have went on to win the Super Bowl and been Hall of Fame coaches, because you don't just off the top of your head rattle all that off. Either he researched it or somebody in his staff did. He was ready with that. So that tells me if he has anything to do with firing the coach, that he's not firing Stefanski. I know that they're both on the same level, but in the answer to the owner, but if it came down to, are you okay, Andrew? Most general managers fire the coach or hire the coach. If they gave him that responsibility, he wouldn't do it, I don't think, based on what he said there. I mean, you go back in the comments, you're going, he really put in some work to get this out in public, how much of a big fan he is of Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's an interesting dynamic right now. If Kevin Stefanski were like Mayo up in New England and fighting for his job, what would his approach to the quarterback situation be any different? Down the stretch here, rather than playing DTR, maybe he's going with Jameis Winston if he thought his job was on the line.
Yeah, I don't think either of them are worried about it. I think you've just seen the tea leaves enough. But the caveat is Jimmy Haslam, we saw in the past, and he even said in that ESPN comment, I've learned over the years not to get too emotional in the moment and wait until the season's over and then evaluate. I'm sure that they're going to sit down and they're going to state their case, because I just think they don't want to start, because right now it'd be basically Jimmy and JW, his son-in-law, would have to do another coaching search. They probably would get Paul DiBattista involved, but I don't think they want to do that. And unless you have somebody lined up, like say it was a year ago and Jim Harbaugh was there and you had it worked out, he's going to be your coach, then you do it. But Harbaugh just waited until Justin Herbert was on the team that was calling. And the Browns quarterback situation right now is a disaster. It's not that appealing, I don't think, to another coach coming in, unless it's first time offensive or defensive coordinator dude that's hoping to get their job, like Mike Pettin or Rob Chudzinski or somebody like that. So you end up getting, you might not get who even's at the top of your list. No. It's like, hey, we want Barry McBride. Hey, Barry, you want the job? Oh, okay. And then you call me. Hey, Fred. Okay. And then you're down to number 5 or 6 or 7th. It's embarrassing for everybody. That's why I go back to the Mike Vrabel. You had him in the building. If you're going to make a change, that's easy right then and there. But to go back out in the open market, and if you wait till the season's over, you're back in the open market.
Yep. All right. Let's go to another question from Dean. He brings up Carson Beck. We'll make sure we hit on that. He asks, how do you sell the idea of actually bringing Deshaun Watson back in 2025? I don't think you really have to sell it. I think there's just no alternative. I mean, that's how you'd have to present it. You can't take the cap hit. It's just too big to cut him at this point in time. There's just no alternative. Or the idea of Kirk Cousins, who looks like he lost it. I think that does require a sales job. Cousins looked very good the years before this last year, and you just have to argue that he was a bad fit for the Atlanta system, for the system they put in there in Atlanta, and he was coming off an Achilles injury. You have to make that case and try to sell it to Cleveland fans. What do you think, Fred?
Well, you just got to see what your alternatives, is a Derek Carr available? Is he a better option? As I laid out in the story a week or so ago, Cousins, is he your best? But yeah, there's two sides to this. You're looking for whether Jacoby Brissett, somebody that we've talked about it, that's obvious that in this system, Kevin Stefanski's system, the pocket passer, works the best. The other alternative is get your running game back upper tier. They were top 5 the first 3 years under Stefanski with Bill Callahan on the offensive line. Everybody gives him the credit, but you forgot about Nick Chubb was setting NFL records as a running back. Last year when he got hurt, they dropped to 11th in the NFL. They still had Bill Callahan, which was pretty good, 11th. This year they're 28th. They don't have Nick Chubb. They didn't have him, healthy. So is it an easier fix to just go back to your roots and try to get a big time running game going on the offensive line and then any quarterback could look a little better. But I still have the belief you got to have somebody that can move the chains, that can make the plays, throw the ball. I do think Cousins wasn't in a good fit. I think that his stock is at an all-time low. I would think he wouldn't have a lot of interest from other teams. I don't know his relationship with Stefanski. If they could sell him on coming to Cleveland at $1 million, kind of like Russell Wilson, I think it would be a great way to, be competitive next year, just like the Falcons did. And then they turned to Penix if he faltered. The Browns draft Cam Ward or somebody and go forward like that. Like I said, I'm not so sure about the Beck kid. I mean, I don't know where he's ranked. If he's middle rounds or below, I don't know if he's your answer other than a third team, kind of like a DTR. I'm just honest there. I don't see him as the answer. I don't see how you can bring in a middle of the road quarterback rookie and expect him to do anything. That's why I said I'm not sure. And if you drafted Cam Ward, that you don't bring in a veteran to start the season, and not force them in like they've done so many times.
Right. Gregory H. asked, what's your biggest concern that you think the Browns won't handle this offseason?
Addressing all the needs. I mean, you thought, and many of us thought this was one of the best rosters we'd seen. They were status quo last year. Felt like they could just bring everybody back. The only change they made on offense was Jerry Jeudy, and turned out to be a good move, but you basically swapped him for Amari Cooper. On defense, you brought everybody back. Biggest move was drafting Michael Hall. Everything else was pretty much bringing them back, lateral moves. So you gotta look in the mirror and say, did these players just weren't as good as we thought they were? Or is it because of the turnover situation? Like when you're negative 20, and I think the biggest thing, I'm going to ask Jim Schwartz if we get a chance this week, if they would have taken the ball away 28 times like they did last year, as opposed to 12, how big of a difference would the defense have been? I mean, right now they're like 17th in the NFL. They'd probably be close to top 10. And because the offense turned it over, how many times has the defense had to start, on their own 20 or, on the Browns 20, 30, and the other team gets a score, on a short field. So I do think that plays into it, but I just think you have to really evaluate, look at your strength. And if the strength right now is still the defense, go all in to get that into the top 10, so you have a defense that you can count on is going to hold an opponent to 17 points or so, 17 to 20 points a game. And then average offense should be able to win you game. This Browns offense this year has not been average. It's been bottom of the NFL.
Right. My personal concern is on the offensive line. I think that obviously quarterback is, a huge issue for the Cleveland Browns, and I think that they're going to do their level best to, try to fill that hole during this offseason. It's obvious that they have to, but I think that they have so many holes on the offensive line that they're just not going to be able to fill them all. And Andrew Berry, frankly, does not have a strong track record, drafting offensive linemen. It just I can't. DeJuan Jones is probably the best example that we have, and at this point, that's not a Pro Bowl selection so far. So that's probably my biggest concern. Any further comments on that, Fred?
No, I mean, he doesn't have a great track record overall, and that's the
Yeah,
other thing. You got this circular. I think he's good at trades, and I think he's good at free agency. But when he's got money to spend and he's got trades, it's just taken on a contract, like Amari Cooper, the Cowboys didn't want to pay him. Jerry Jeudy, the Broncos didn't want to pay. Look for those situations, take advantage because you got an owner that'll spend the money. So,
right.
That's what they got to do. They got to get an influx of talent. But I do think quarterback issue, like always, is so big.
Yeah,
Where there's 40 names on the wall. It's you should get lucky in that thing, and that's just shows you the odds to get the right one.
right, right. Last question. We'll go into the exciting world of Cleveland local politics here. Trill Hill wants to know, Fred, do you think that the city of Cleveland can force the Haslams to sell? I'm not familiar with the Modell law, but that's apparently the trigger in the Modell law that they can force the owners to sell to a local Cleveland group if they try to move them from the city of Cleveland.
Well, first of all, Haslams are worth about $9 billion. I think the Browns recently I heard was five billion, value. I don't know how many Northeast Ohioans have 5 billion on hand. So I don't think anybody can afford it. But the Modell law, as I understand the spirit of that, is to move so they never move like to Baltimore again. I get that. But we're talking about from where this property they built at night, you can see downtown. I mean, we're talking 10, 15 minutes away. I mean, I think this is crazy. I mean, I don't know why they would pick a fight like this. A billionaire is going to get to do what he wants. You don't just buy 180 acres and say, okay, they're not violating anything. They're waiting until the lease is up, all that kind of stuff. So, and what you're doing is picking a fight where somebody that was willing to maybe help you develop the lakefront, and I'll say, figure it out on your own.
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know what you think you're gaining by this. Do you really think you can hold somebody? How did that work with Al Davis? My whole life, he moved from Oakland to LA to Oakland to LA to Oakland to LA. There's probably lawsuits still going. Big deal. They're going to have a dome belt and move, and this thing will still be in litigation.
Still be litigating it. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of people, lawyers getting rich, like always. Somebody said to the politicians, hey, let's sue them. And then we're going to get the money rolling for years.
Yeah. Battalions of lawyers being airdropped by
not what I want to talk about, to be honest. It's like, great.
Yeah, I know. But we try to get in as many questions as we can.
That's a valid question. I'm just saying that, I mean, the Browns have enough problems with the on the field product, I don't know, with this, I don't think you're going to bully them into selling the team thinking, oh, this is a way to get them to sell the team.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen either. But what is going to happen is that the OBR Weekly will be back again next Monday at 8 o'clock. Me and Fred here talking about the Browns' last game of the season, Probably not. We probably won't be talking about that very much. We'll be talking about the offseason and getting ready to kick off a great offseason coverage here at the OBR. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Thank you very much for the questions. We weren't able to get to all of them, but we got to as many as we could. And please give us a subscribe and a like on your way out. Reward us for hanging out, 5-6 days a week here on the OBR streaming network. And thanks for attending. We'll see you next Monday. Bye, folks.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Hopefully 2025 will be a better one.